Hello. So by the title of this, you can tell it's going to be an interesting video, but not really. This is more of like a teaser. If you want more, go to Stop Black on Black Oppression on YouTube. That's my YouTube channel, and watch some of the videos on there. But there will soon be a more in-depth video with links helping you find. Where you can find some of this information. So when we talk about Antifa or Black Lives Matter, when the leader came out and said that there is an ideology behind the movement, and it's that her and another leader were trained Marxist, like, well, that's not cool because Marxism is racist, and the ideology is infected with racism against blacks, nonetheless. So you can see, and there's quotes for this. Karl Marx. Karl Marx himself was a racist, and he referred to blacks as niggers and as in an inferior race. Like, you would think if you read Karl Marx's letters to Engels and some of the other things that he said, you would think that he was a white supremacist or a fascist. And then this leads me into the next topic is that, the white supremacists and the Antifa, black bloc or what, mobs or thugs. I mean, you can't really call them thugs because they're not really that tough when they're by themselves. Normally it's only when they're in groups. Like there's a big difference between like when a Proud Boy gets arrested and an Antifa person gets arrested, and they're actually arrested in some place where they're going to face charges. The Antifa person cries, the Proud Boy, I mean, he stands up. So, but I want to say, like, if you are, I got the lights are motion detected, so. So like if you're pro like BLM, like the movement, the organization, if you didn't send them money, you're actually you're cooning, really, and you're going against your own interests, because Marxists at the core of it are racist, and not just against blacks, but like he really doesn't like blacks. And in my video, I will put some of those quotes in there. I also put the links if you go to my page. And I'll put some other information too. So like when you talk about Antifa, like, anti-fascist, well, the reason they are anti-fascist is because they are communists. And in Hitler's time, he was competing with the communists for power, the Marxist. Right. So then, that party that was, the minority and they were losing, they became, and they established Antifa. But I would argue that if the Marxists would have won, there probably would have been much more lives lost in the long term. Right. I mean, because both Hitler and the Stalin and them, eventually Russia would expand as well to conquer. So it was probably better that it was Hitler first, because I mean he was much easier stopped, and it's good that he attacked Russia, because then he had to fight a war on both sides, so he couldn't focus his military might on the Allies, which France and Britain were almost, beat completely until we jumped in, which leads me to FDR, which FDR, he's quoted as saying, like, a lot of his friends are communist, and he actually admired Stalin. And some of the officials in his White House were communists. They were actually communist agents, working from orders from from Moscow, and to help focus the Allied efforts on stopping Hitler from getting, taking Russia. Um, and so they put a lot of their resources in World War II towards, the European fight, and that actually drew a lot of resources away from the Pacific, um, which made that conflict a lot tougher for those soldiers who were fighting there. But so we also got to talk about the federal housing under the New Deal and some of the other agencies that had to deal with housing and the war effort, meaning like building tanks and ammunitions and stuff like that, and blacks in housing. Right under the New Deal, that's where we get a lot of the segregation, where areas that were formerly not segregated or not as segregated. I mean, there were some that were mixed. They actually, using housing, they actually built cheap housing, federal housing buildings, complexes, and segregated them. And then that's how they were able to then um, segregate areas that were formerly not segregated. And it was unconstitutional all the way around. But, under FDR, I mean, they're racist, and the communists are racist. So like, just because they got into the office or they did penetrate and get into um, those organizations under the New Deal, different branches of the government under the New Deal. And they were only able to, they were only able to do it because they held a lot of the same ideology as the progressives, which I would argue that the progressives were the fascists before we ever had a Hitler and a Stalin. If you look at what they believe and how they acted, they were the prototype, and Hitler even borrowed stuff from the progressives. We've been taught that the progressives were the champions of abolishing the hatred towards blacks and all that's like, that's not true. They flipped history. This is what they do, is they flip everything upside down. This is why government schools are dangerous, because they get to select the curriculum, what they teach your kids, and then thus they shape history however they want. Even though it was the government that segregated. So if you want to talk about systematic racism, like, it's segregated. And FDR was a Democrat. Not saying that all Democrats, were, but that their party has a history of being racist, and they're doing the same thing now. Like, because they used to use fear tactics and hate tactics with whites, they now flipped, and now they control blacks, and they find it more beneficial to do it that way. But I'm gonna show you some of these sources in my video that I make, and I'll read some things and show some articles and show some proof for this. But I hope you guys have a good day, because it's morning here, and research it yourself. But I hope I see you on my YouTube page, Stop Black on Black Oppression, and have a good day. Shalom.